This is The Drive with Dale Lolley and Matt Williamson on your 24/7 home of the black and gold. SNR, Steelers Nation Radio.
Welcome to The Drive. I am Dale Lolley. He is the Matt Williamson. And Matt, we talked about the Warren Sharp schedule stuff that comes out. Well, he has now come out with his rest factors for everybody. And the Steelers, on the negative end of this.
Yeah, in the middle-ish, but they didn't get hit too hard.
They're not on the extremes.
There's some extremes. And I haven't got a chance to really study it, just the Steelers I looked at and the best and the worst, basically. But we did talk a little bit about it on my other podcast, and this is becoming my co-host. I didn't really think of it, but it's obviously true. This wasn't as big a deal 20 years ago, 15 years ago. I mean, it's all
because everybody played on Sundays or Monday night. There were no Thursday night games. There were no standalone other games.
Right. And, overseas stuff and COVID and games on Tuesday and Wednesday and Christmas. And it was either Thanksgiving or that was really the only holiday that was, different. But now it's a bit of an issue, and some of these teams are getting hit hard and really benefited a lot, too.
Yeah, the Lions at the top of the spectrum at plus 13 days, almost 2 full weeks of additional rest over their opponents. Miami at plus 11. On the bottom end of that, Vegas at minus 19.
It's huge. And you're looking at it. I'm going to pull it up here in a second. I think the Lions only have one game that they have a negative rest situation. It's only one day. One time the whole year. Maybe I should tell people what this has meant here. Like, if you play on Monday and I play Sunday, both week 2, and we meet in week 3, I get a 1-day rest advantage.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or if it's a week, it's, obviously.
Well, and a big part of this is built in from the buys, which, again, goes back to there used to be no buys.
That too, right.
So, for example, the Saints this year play 3 teams coming off a bye.
Right. Hit hard.
So they're minus 14. They only play themselves one team. Everybody has a game where they play off the bye unless you're playing somebody else coming off the bye.
Right. So they have one that they're plus 7, but they have 3 that they're minus 7.
Yeah.
That's brutal.
I did think about that little quirk of the Steelers' schedule, for example. So the Steelers play Minnesota in week 4 in Ireland. The Browns play the Vikings the following week in London.
Okay. Right.
The Steelers have their bye that week.
Correct.
The Browns then come back and play the Steelers in week 6.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get the bye.
They don't get a
bye.
Okay, so that's a great time to play Cleveland too.
As if you're going to need that.
Yeah, but you pick up 7-day rest just in that game, and they're coming from overseas. But it shocks me that a couple of these teams, like New Orleans or Vegas, I'm sorry. There's only one time they have a rest advantage, and it's just 1 day. A couple of these only happen once or twice. Again, the Lions only have a disadvantage once through the whole course of the year. The teams at the top here are the Lions, Miami, the Rams, the Niners, who already had the easiest schedule in the league before all this. Seattle's near the top. And then there's 3 at the bottom that are way different than everybody else, and that's, as you mentioned, Vegas, New Orleans, who you referenced, and Washington at minus 13. That's a lot over the course of the year. And another team that stood out to me was one right in the middle was Jacksonville. They're plus 1, but basically
it's a net
it's
zero.
It's like nothing, because there's 2 games that they're plus 1, and there's only 1 game they're minus 1. So they're always almost playing on equal rest,
Yeah.
Where some of these teams have a lot of games. That was the other thing that stood out to me, too, is how many games this year will be played with one team having a rest advantage. It's a ton. I mean, I don't think the league cares.
It doesn't, and I don't know that there's any way to get around it because of all the standalone games.
Right,
That's the big thing, is that you just can't.
And this doesn't even attribute for like a Sunday night game. If you're Sunday night on the road and you play next Sunday, that's different than playing at 1.
Right. For example, when the Steelers go to Los Angeles to play the Chargers, that counts as a Sunday game.
But it's really a disadvantage.
But really, it's another disadvantage.
Yeah, that's not like playing at 1 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
Not even close. But there's a ton of games where one team has a rest advantage. It's not always just one game or one day.
And for the teams that don't play Monday night game, or I should say Thursday night games,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to have. They should be on the upper end of that. I'm looking here. The Tennessee Titans, however, are not.
Right. Okay.
The Saints,
that's a good point.
The
right.
Saints are one of the. They're
one of the other
Thursday
teams too.
Game.
Right.
Like how does that work out? I don't quite understand that one.
Yeah. I mean, the Saints obviously, as you mentioned, had 3 times they're playing a team off a bye, which is a little unfair. But they do get one where they're coming off a bye.
But that puts you at minus 21 right there, or minus 14 before you even start to factor in the other games.
Yeah. But you would think the Thursday night teams would be more affected. Just because there's a lot of plus
well,
threes.
Well, they do it with the way
threes.
they do it. Like Dallas is +5. Dallas plays 4 Thursday night games, but one's the opener,
which doesn't count,
and 2 are back-to-back.
Yeah, and their opponent is the
Detroit.
Lions on one of them, who's at the top of the list, and that's an equal.
I don't know. I don't
0.
think because those 2 teams choose to play on Thanksgiving. That's the traditional game. I don't think they should get an advantage out of that.
I don't either. And Dallas always does every year. They always play either a Thursday before Thanksgiving or a Thursday after. And I don't know what makes them so special. There's 6 teams playing Thursday. Right. Why should they get the difference? I don't understand that. But people are probably interested in what the Steelers, how they stack up, is they have one game where the opponent has a 7-game rest, and they don't. So they're -7 in one game. They're -3 in 2 games, which will be a team coming off a Thursday.
Yeah.
They're -1 on one game. That's the Lions, who's at the top of the list. And
they're positive with one of their games coming off a Thursday game, and they get the bye week.
And the bye week advantage over the Browns that we talked about, right? You wish it wasn't against the Browns. You wish you could cash it in against somebody else. But they're kind of at the bottom of the league.
If it was going to be against the Browns, let it be for the game up there.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Good point. So the Steelers are -4, which is near the bottom. But
it's near the bottom, but it's close to the middle.
Yeah. It's nothing like Vegas, New Orleans, or Washington, who are, frankly, getting screwed pretty bad on that.
Yeah, Cleveland's a -7, Buffalo's a -7, the Titans are -6, Carolina's -5. Those are the teams that are worse off in this regard than the Steelers. The teams that are on the plus side of this, you got Detroit at +13, Miami at +11, the Rams at +10, San Francisco at +9, Seattle at +8, Arizona at +7, Baltimore again at +5.
Last year they set the record for having the best rest advantage.
Dallas is +5. The Chargers are +5. The Giants and then Eagles are both +4, like the Steelers are -4. So
as you mentioned, the Ravens have the best rest advantage in the division. Cincy's also +3. Steelers are -4. And the Browns, if they don't have enough things going against them, are -7.
In every one of Dallas's Thursday night games, they get the rest advantage over the team that they're playing against.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Dallas has 4 Thursday night games.
Okay, yeah.
In every one of those games, they get the rest advantage over the team that they're playing against.
Wow, okay. No, they play the Lions the week after.
They're
right?
+3 on in 4 different situations.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. I wonder how does that work then? How can you be +3 if are they a Christmas team or something? Is Christmas on?
They
a
must
weird
have
day
a Christmas.
This year?
They must
like
have
a Christmas Monday thing or something.
So
like
yeah,
that?
they play, and I did see something where they play like 6 games in a row against teams that won 11 games last year.
Really?
But they have a pretty sizable rest advantage over a lot of those teams.
I think a rest advantage is huge. Yeah, I mean, let alone, the travel stuff or a Monday nighter, and then you have to go on the road, those type of things. But I think it's cool that Sharp does this because I think it adds up and it definitely is advantageous.
Yeah. So we'll see if it matters this year. We'll see if Vegas is affected. Everybody's looking at Vegas. Oh, they're much improved this year. Well, they may be much improved this year, but they have a rest advantage basically over nobody all season long.
Okay. Interesting stuff. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. The Browns have a rest advantage of 1 day in 3 different situations.
Mm-hmm. Which is fine.
Fine.
You're playing a team coming off a Monday night or whatever. It's helpful, but it's not a ton.
Yeah. And they don't have any of those.
And they have no night games, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
None. They got one standalone game, that being the game in Minnesota against Minnesota in London.
In London. That's their only featured game. Okay. But no, I think it's a huge advantage. I mean, a team like Detroit or the Ravens last year, that's already a really good team. You would think you have a better chance of not sustaining as many injuries, definitely resting up injuries, or a player that's questionable. I get 8 days to heal instead of 7.
Well, let's look at this from last year's perspective.
Yeah.
Last year, the team with the least amount of rest, minus 21 days. So three weeks.
Wow.
Was the 49ers.
And they got crushed.
They got crushed by injuries.
I didn't scroll down yet to see some of the other stuff he put together. So
that's why this matters.
That
because if a
guy
guy gets nicked up and you're on a short work week, he's not going to be available for the next game.
And we mentioned the Ravens, and they were the healthiest offense in the league last year.
Yeah. Because again, if a guy's a little bit sore early in the week,
right?
If you're playing a regular game on 7 days rest or even 6 days rest, maybe he doesn't play.
Right.
But when you've got 10 days,
or if it's 4,
he
definitely doesn't play.
Yeah, if it's 4, he's not playing at all.
Right.
Yeah. But if it's you played Thursday night and you got a full week of rest,
it matters.
He's probably going to be ready.
That matters. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's a huge advantage, and I've heard, I haven't this year, but I heard Warren on podcasts talking about it after last year, and it angers him. He just thinks like, man, the NFL talks about player safety, but they don't put any of this into consideration. Like, he doesn't even know, these are his words, if schedule makers even take this into account.
I don't think they do.
Boy, we have one team, a huge advantage in rest over and over and over. I think he just kind of pulled this out of the blue.
Yeah. I mean, you see it when you look at the bottom, the way the chart goes. I mean, it's a distinct line on both sides of this team's got a lot of rest and
because there's a big difference between the ones at the top and bottom.
Yeah,
huge. Humongous. Right.
Massive. So we'll see. Keep an eye on this and see if it does factor into things by the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, if you're thinking about like over under win totals, things like that, I would definitely take a look at this and be more boisterous on the teams that have a lot of rest.
Does this make you more inclined to favor Detroit or Miami or the Rams?
Rams and Detroit.
Detroit's schedule is much more difficult this year than it was last year. I think
they
Detroit,
got the Eagles.
Detroit was 9-0 last year against teams that didn't have a winning record.
Yeah,
they were 6-2 in games where when they played a team that did finish. They're a good team.
Right. I mean, it's a really good division
they
too.
They feasted on.
They killed the bad teams. Yeah, they beat up on the bad teams. I was leaning towards the under on them just because 2 new coordinators more than anything. I think a lot of change there, and I have respect for Campbell as a coach, but I still think he's a little unproven, that he hasn't dealt with being the hunted, but this might change my mind, but I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's a high over-under win total anyway, but it's a nice advantage, that's for sure.
Yeah. So we'll see. It's just another thing to factor into the schedule.
Yeah. No, I think it absolutely matters. You mentioned a couple times in the last 2 days all the air miles that teams are traveling. And
that matters too.
That definitely matters. I mean, Chargers versus the Bengals is night and day.
Yeah. So
playing in Brazil. Far, right.
Even in the opener. But,
still, you got to fly home.
Then you got to fly home.
Yeah.
It's a long trip.
It's a long trip. Yeah. Interesting stuff.
I wonder how far that is. I don't even know.
I think it's a lot farther than I would have guessed.
I think it's farther than going to Europe.
I think so too.
You wouldn't think that, but
yeah.
Just the way you got to go over the.
No, I think it's a very long trip.
It's a very long way.
Who are they playing?
Eagles. No.
Eagles played their last.
They're
year.
playing the Chiefs.
Oh, okay.
It's another game. The Chiefs.
It's another standalone KC game. Okay,
yeah.
Interesting. Wow.
So, anyways, let's get to a break. He is the Matt Williamson. I am Dale Lolley. You're listening to The Drive here on the Steelers Audio Network. Matt and I will be back with more right after this. And we are back. I'm Dale Lolley. He is the Matt Williamson. And Matt, the league will have another owners' meetings next week.
Yeah.
And
that's next week, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
The tush-push proposal will be talked about again. They made no tweaks to it, though, in what's going to be discussed,
really? Okay.
Which is kind of interesting. So I don't expect that to pass.
You don't think there'll be any changes?
Because the way it was written initially, It's just banning the tush push itself, aiding the quarterback when he is behind the center.
Okay.
And some of the questions that were asked by different coaches about it, well, okay, can I then push the guard? Can I? Mm-hmm. Is that illegal?
Is there any pushing allowed at all?
Yeah, it didn't. It was very specifically written that you can't aid the quarterback or a ball carrier.
A ball carrier. Okay.
The person who accepts a snap. And so I don't expect that to.
You don't think it changes at all? Then,
no, I don't think it gets passed this year. But one thing that is going to be interesting.
I'd love to see him rewrite that as you just can't aid any ball carriers.
Yeah, which is what the rule used to be. I think it was 2004 when that got changed.
Okay. So that's not even on the table.
No.
Yeah, that probably won't change then.
Then maybe somebody next year comes up with a better I just think it was a poorly written proposal.
That's what I'm sitting here thinking. Like, it sounds like they kind of missed their opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're also going to talk about the reseeding of the playoffs.
Yeah, and I did hear something about that. Okay.
They've come up with a new wording on this. Mm-hmm. And Detroit's proposal is, they propose this thing, competitive equity provides excitement and competition in late season games, rewards the best performing teams from the regular season. What they are proposing is that teams will be seeded in order of the way that they finish, based strictly on record. But
go ahead.
If let's say Seattle plays Minnesota in the regular season, mm-hmm. Seattle wins the West.
Okay.
But Minnesota beats them in the regular season, and they finish with the same record.
And Minnesota doesn't win the division.
And Minnesota doesn't win the division. They're a wild card team.
Yeah.
Seattle, based on winning the division, would be the higher seed, even though they lost to the Vikings, because they won the division.
Well, how's that different than now? I mean, the division winners are the top 4 seeds.
Well, it's only if they have the same record.
Oh, okay. So if the Vikings had a better record,
even though they beat Seattle,
doesn't matter
it wouldn't matter. Now, if that were the case, if they were both wild cards, that would be the tiebreaker.
Gotcha. So that year that Seattle, what were they, 8-8 or 9-7? They won their division.
They would have been the 7th.
They probably would have been a 7 seed.
They would have been 6 seed.
You're right. Okay.
Even though they won the division.
I don't love it. I do find it interesting that it's Detroit proposing it, because that's a really hard division, and they could end up being a 12-win second-place team pretty easily. Yeah. I mean, I could see the teams in that division getting behind it. AFC North has kind of been down that road, too, over the years.
I think the reason why the commissioner is kind of behind the scenes, seemingly behind this whole thing, is here's why. And this is according to Albert Breer on SI.com. He said in the current system, the Texans, who were the 4 seed last year in the AFC, went into Week 18 locked in as that 4th seed.
Well, I hadn't thought about that angle of it. You don't want people. Nobody wants rest.
But in the way that this system would be, they could have been the 4, 5, 6, or 7 seed based on that. So now they can't
compete with the wild card teams.
Yeah. Now they can't sit people in Week 18.
Yeah.
Now they got to play.
Yeah.
Unless they're okay being a 7 seed.
I mean, I know the league. When I said they don't like rest, that's different than the first segment. I know the league hates when people are resting their starters in Week 18. It's a bad product. I want to see Lamar. I want to see Allen. Blah blah blah. So I guess that part's interesting.
Same thing for the Rams last year. The Rams went into the final week of the season last year, knowing they'd be the 3 or the 4.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just
happy with it.
They could have been 4, 5, 6, or 7
with a loss.
With a loss, and somebody else wins. Yeah, moves ahead of them.
Okay, because I originally, when I heard some of this and when you explained it, I thought there's really something to be said for winning your division. You structure your team to win your division. You know you got to play these 6 games every year. AFC North football is different than NFC South football, and structure yourself accordingly. But I kind of like that angle too. Nobody wants Week 18 not to matter, or everyone to rest, or anyone to rest starters. And I guess I can get behind it then.
The Eagles last year went into Week 18 set as the number 2 seed because they were the division winner.
Yeah.
In the adjusted system, they could have fallen to 3 with a loss. in that game.
Okay. There's probably a ton of examples of
Yeah.
it. Right. Interesting. Because I guess Minnesota had a really good record.
Right.
Even though they didn't win their division.
Detroit, if Minnesota had beaten Detroit in that final game and won the division, they would have had I think the same record as Detroit, would have knocked the Eagles because they had a better record.
Yes. The Vikings would have been the 1 seed, the Lions would have been the 2.
Right. And the Eagles would have fallen to 3.
Which, again, it's interesting the Lions proposed this because the Vikings in this system would have been a top 3 no matter what, and they ended up the 5, right? And lost. But, but still. Where would the game be played? At the favorite?
The higher seed.
The higher seed, okay.
They're also proposing that after the first round of the playoffs,
that they reseed.
You reseed. Yeah.
Okay.
So the lowest seed automatically goes to the number 1 seed.
I don't know how basketball and hockey do it. I should have thought in my head, but
There's
it wouldn't.
Brackets.
There's still brackets.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the Final Four, where it's just you can see what your path is going to be. You like reseeding?
I really don't care.
I would say that doesn't change my life much, but it'd be really tough to be. You brought them up yesterday. The Steelers winning all those road games as a wild card would get even harder.
Well, that year they went through. I think the Bengals were the Bengals would have been the 3 seed? There were 6 teams.
3 played
top
4.
2 got the bye. They get
5 played 6. Right.
Yeah, they were the 3 seed. The Steelers were the 6.
Mm-hmm.
Then they played the top seed. They played the 1 seed. The
they played the 1.
The Colts were number 1.
Yeah.
The Broncos were number 2. So they went through all those teams anyways.
Okay, their particular
They beat the 3, 2, and 1 all in.
But you would almost have to if you're the 7 seed, assuming winners win.
Yeah.
But even if winners don't win, you're playing the best team out. If you're the 7 seed, you're going to play the hardest team.
You're going to play
week.
the 2 seed, then you're going to play the 1 seed if you win.
If you win. You're right. And then whoever's left. But, yeah, okay. I guess it means more then.
Yeah.
Again, that might promote someone. The Rams were a good example last year. Like if there's a team that's we're going to be the 4 or the 5. Well, maybe I'm going to play my guys in week 18 because I don't want to be the 5. Like if 6 and 7 lose, then we got to play the toughest teams.
Yeah.
I guess that would promote less resting.
Which is what they want. They don't want games to be meaningless.
Exactly. That
which
seems like
I get. I just don't know if this is the way to do it.
Yeah, I'm going to say, is that the best way to do it? I don't know. It's one motivation at least.
Yeah, it's something.
Mm-hmm.
They're also going to talk about allowing NFL players to compete in the flag football at the 2028 Olympics.
Okay. Do you think many would?
Oh, I think those.
I think so. Yeah.
And that would happen, I believe, right before training camp.
Injuries would scare the heck out of me.
Would scare the heck out of you. Yeah.
But other sports have them, and
let's be realistic about this with the NFL and flag football. How many guys would actually be able to compete? None of your offense. You don't play offensive linemen.
No,
or defensive linemen.
I wonder how big the rosters even are.
Yeah.
Would you have defensive backs?
We're talking about defensive
ways?
Backs, skill position players.
The quarterback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, in some, if you watch flag football games, they're way different than an NFL game.
Way different. I mean, I haven't watched like a professional flag game. I watch right Upper St. Clair's.
A lot of the flag football players are these 140-pound guys that are just shifty as all get-go.
No doubt. Like Tyreek's of the world would be really good in it.
Yeah. The guys like that are fine.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously speed matters, but
there was a pass rush. I mean, we were the Maroon 6. You dressed 6 dudes, and there was 2 linemen. You'd snap the ball, and then if you faked a handoff, you could go in. Otherwise, you'd count the 3-1,000 loudly or whatever,
But a lot of the quarterbacks are used to just standing in the pocket. I'm going to stand here, and you're going to have to get me on the ground.
Yeah,
Whereas if I just got to run and grab your flag, it's a lot completely different.
A lot different story. I wonder if there'd be any pass rush.
Like Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger would not be a great flag football player.
Kyler Murray would. I mean, right. Yeah, exactly, right. You
don't
have to see the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, as athletic as Ben made his bones by standing in the pocket and shaking guys off.
Right.
Well, if they're grabbing his flag, it doesn't do you any good.
It doesn't do you any good. It's a totally different world. And even some of the big receivers might not be as great.
But it'd be helpful to be 6'5".
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, the big, slow guy. I mean, would there even
still
be
go up and get it?
Tight ends or linebackers on the field? Would you have one pass rusher, one pass blocker without pads on, that could get violent. I mean, it gets violent with kids.
Yeah.
Like, obviously it's much different, but like back then when my kids were young, the dudes that played tackle, not only were they better, but they shed blocks hard.
Yeah.
There's no pads. I mean, the little kid comes out trying to block them and they just, I don't know. I mean, I guess that happens now, whether they're professional or not. I haven't watched any professional flag or Olympic flag.
Yeah, I can remember my son. I think my oldest son played flag football like 1 year, but he'd already played tackle football, and he was running with the ball, and somebody came up to
probably
to get him, and he lowered his shoulder, and the coach was like,
yeah, you're not allowed to do that. There's a fine line, man, especially the blocking stuff. I mean, you get a big guard come rolling around and just trampling kids. You could definitely do that.
Yeah.
And there's no helmet, there's no pads.
But it won't be for everybody.
No,
NFL
right.
players.
I mean, again, it's an Olympic sport now, I'm sure there's some sort of violence or some sort of rules against it too that would apply to, Quentin Nelson too.
You got to come out and see the violence inherent in the system.
Exactly.
These NFL players are going to be repressed on the.
They are. I think they'd do it though.
Oh, I know there'd be guys that would do it.
Yeah.
There'd be a lot of guys who think they can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm a really good NFL player.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean you'll be a great flag football player.
But would like Pat Mahomes also have to play safety? Is there a defense and an offense? I mean, like all our kids play both ways, of course. That was young, but I don't know. I bet the owners say no. And I know NBA does, hockey does.
If it's me and I'm like, okay, my $20 million cornerback wants to do this, and be like, no.
Right.
We're not doing that.
I mean, Sidney Crosby plays, and expensive hockey players play too, but doesn't mean the NFL is going to be cool with it.
Yeah, right before the season too.
Before the season. I'd rather you did it after.
Or
if it
were in the spring,
right,
but, but it's Summer Olympics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would hate that. I mean, if you lose somebody right now, or even like a couple
weeks
from now,
2 weeks before training camp, he tears his ACL playing flag football.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be happy about that.
Who was the running back? Edwards for the Patriots. They had rookie.
It was a rookie games, on the beach.
Or something, and his career basically ended. And he was a really good rookie running back that they were counting on, and that wasn't even like right before the season.
And that's
that's a Pro Bowl.
The average NFL career is now about 3 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm a player, I
don't know that I'd do it.
I get it. I want to go. It'd be cool to do, and compete in the Olympics, but do I want to risk my career for this?
Right. Or my season, even. I mean, there probably wouldn't be a lot of broken bones and collisions, but you can tweak an ankle or a knee or whatever just as easily.
You're not in pads. You you trip and fall and fracture your clavicle or something.
Mm-hmm. Possibly, right.
There's all kinds of bad stuff that can happen.
NFL's king and the king of the kings.
Just pull a hamstring badly.
Right. Even if I can't participate in training camp, not like I'm out for the year, but I miss all camp.
I mean, Dermontti Dawson pulled his hamstring in the Pro Bowl.
Did he?
And that kind of ended his career.
Yeah, it hung around. Yeah. I bet the owners say no.
Or turf toe.
Oh yeah,
turf toe got Jack Lambert.
Right. Oh, there's plenty of injuries you could suffer. The other thing is, we were always worried about concussions. I mean, it's real easy to smack heads together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, real easy, like soccer. There's no protection at all.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I understand it. And again,
it sounds cool.
My
and the
kids
more you
played,
talk
your kids played flag football. It's a great sport, and it's a great way, to get kids
catching and running
involved
and having fun
in the game and having fun with it.
Right. And a lot of parents don't want to see pads on them.
Yeah.
And,
And honestly, I mean, I mean, there is some translation to the NFL game.
No question. You would
speed and shiftiness, and
we had a route tree.
Yeah,
I mean, that kind of thing. Right.
It's not all that different from 7-on-7 drills.
No, it's not that much different. Tackling is obviously way different, but right, there is some form of tackling at least.
But I don't know if I want my star players doing it right before training camp.
Definitely don't. The more I think about it, I don't want not one bit.
Yeah,
it doesn't excite me at all. Now, like, if Ben wants to play now, great. I mean, like, after you retire, maybe it would be fun. But, Jerry Rice out there, that's a bad example. Larry, somebody recent, I mean, that's at the end.
And I could see guys doing, like, some guy that's 27 years old and just is recently out of the league, and I'm not in camp with anybody. I'm going to try to.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to do this.
That's great, and try out, and maybe you get it.
Let's say it's I don't know. I'm just trying to think of a guy off the top of my head.
I mean, even a Derek Carr type or something like that, or
let's say it's somebody who's been out of the game for a few years, but still thinks they can. Like Eli Rogers is always trying to work his way back into.
Is he?
And let's say hey, I'm in shape. Yeah. I'm a good route runner. I'm shifty.
His style game fits.
Yeah, this would be a great outlet for guys like that.
And I wonder, is he, let alone like Tyreek, are they way better than the guys that are competing now in the Olympics?
They're probably better. Well, that I don't know because they've never done it before.
Right. I bet Tyreek's a lot harder to deal with than whoever's representing America right now.
I don't know. I've seen some videos.
I mean, I'm sure they're awesome. Yeah. They're the best of the best, but
they're just a lot of them are guys that were just too small.
Oh, okay.
To
not super physical, but they're real shifty.
Again, they're 140, 150-pound guys. That I mean, at some point the game just passes you by. Doesn't mean you can't play.
No, right.
There are outliers in the NFL right now. Like Calvin Austin would be probably a great flag football player.
I would think. I was thinking about some of the real small backs.
Yeah.
Dree Archer and McCluster and those type of dudes too, because there is a running game. It's not all throwing.
Right.
And we had 2 or 3 run plays, but you weren't breaking any tackles either. You know, I mean, so there'd probably be a running back involved or some kind of ball carrier.
Yeah. So I don't know if those guys, like the NFL players, are going to be markedly better than some of those guys. Those guys are just too small to play tackle football.
There's probably some really good dudes
beyond
like
a certain level.
Right.
Like we see guys in the draft every year. Like I like his game, but he's 160 pounds.
And if you do have to play both ways, I'm sure there's a lot of those guys that are pretty good running back, pretty good linebacker, but is Fred Warner a good running back? Is Najee Harris a good linebacker? Yeah. Probably not. I mean, give me Hunter. That's a perfect game for him. But I still bet the owners say nope.
I would be inclined to think that.
Yeah. And with the players too, like most of them dread training camp. Do you want to train for this the month before training camp?
Well, and that's the other side. Part of this, like you got to go live in the NFL or the Olympic Village.
Yeah, right.
When the dream team gets together, they go and they live in like. You're not just I'm going to go rent a house and I don't even know where the Olympics are at in 2028.
Somewhere beautiful and I'm rich and I'm going to live in this house by myself. No, right. You got to train, make the team during that stretch is the only time you have off. Right after mini camps, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yuck. Yeah, that's the only vacation time, and you're going to do that. Somebody would, but
somebody will. I have no doubt, but
I don't think the $20 million players will.
I wouldn't.
I wouldn't
want to risk it because again, most NFL contracts are not guaranteed, and there's a lot of stuff written into your contracts. Like you get hurt playing basketball or something like that,
or whatever.
Riding your motorcycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can void the contract.
Yeah, you can tear that up. Right. Yeah, I don't think the owners will do it, but I do think some players would. But it's the fringe guys that I'm probably going to get cut, or
But if I can go win an Olympic gold, that's worth something. Maybe I'll get on a box of Wheaties or something.
Yeah. You have a real career. You're an accountant or whatever, and you do that on the side or whatever. Maybe after you couldn't make it in the NFL or whatever.
We should be on a box of Wheaties.
Yeah, the Drive Wheaties box. Huh? I like it.
Maybe cornflakes. Anyways, let's get to another break. He is the Matt Williamson. I am Dale Lolley. You're listening to The Drive here on the Steelers Audio Network. Matt and I will be back with more right after this. Welcome back. I am Dale Lolley. He is the Matt Williamson. And Matt, last week the Jets released their longtime punter, Thomas Morstead, 39 years old. Today they released Greg Zierlein, their place kicker. So
wholesale changes.
Making wholesale changes there. And again, well, that's the Steelers' regular season opener.
Okay, I was wondering where you're going with this.
Breaking in new punter, new kicker, new holder.
Yeah.
Whole deal.
The whole deal. New offensive coordinator, new coach, new quarterback. A lot of huge changes for the Jets. A lot of new.
In New York.
New New York. And we talked about this a lot last year with the Rodgers-led team, that it was an old and fragile build, and it didn't work that way at all. This regime must be looking at it totally different.
Well, that was, when you go back and look at the schedule stuff, I want to say the Jets last year played 5 of their first 8 games were primetime games.
I know there was a ton.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of speculation, which I don't believe. Rodgers was waiting until the schedule came out so he doesn't have to play as many night games and see all that stuff. I'm like, I doubt that's going to change his opinion if he plays or not.
Yeah.
But I do remember there was a ton, and I'm sure the league wasn't thrilled. Well, especially his first year in the Jets. I mean, he gets hurt the first game. They had a bunch of them that year and with bad quarterbacks.
Yeah, well, that was one of the things that when the schedule came out last year, they have a little press conference about it, conference call, and somebody asked about it. Well, the Jets kind of owe us for last year. Somebody at the league said, jokingly that.
Yeah. I don't owe you anything, but right, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the less we see the New York teams on primetime TV, it does the world a service because they both stink.
And I say they've been bad for so long,
yeah.
too. I mean, they're not great run organizations, to be honest, and
they're not real compelling.
They're not real compelling. There's not, even this year, there's not much to get excited about. Like, oh, boy, I think they're going to turn the corner. I mean, maybe Jackson Dart turns into something or Fields revitalizes his career, maybe, but they're both kind of long shots at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know. But interesting.
Yeah, so Greg the Leg.
Probably done.
Good. I mean, somebody's probably going to need a kicker at some point this year. But this is
first injury or whatever.
You don't want to be in a situation where you're changing out. That's a bad place to be.
We talk about that a lot. I mean, that Boswell is such a wonderful thing to just automatic, and it shocks you when he misses. But I do think there's a kicker shortage in the league where there's like 25. I'm guessing
it might not even be that many.
Maybe not all that many that are professional, definite starting kickers.
The level of what is considered adequate.
Yeah,
now
keeps going up.
Isn't what it was 10 years ago.
Times 1,000. Yeah, 100%.
If you make 80% of your kicks now, you're having a bad year.
You're having a bad year, and again, you're one of those teams that don't have the 25 or 20 of them. That is a revolving door of, bring in 2 guys on Tuesday to kick. And I'm sure, I know, Danny Smith and special teams coaches and kicking specialists gain a lot out of that. But I always kind of laugh at we brought in 2 kickers and worked them out. Well, you didn't rush them. There's no wind. You're in the indoor.
When the Ravens released Tucker last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, and NFL.com put out a video of the rookie kicker that they took.
Yeah.
And he's kicking these long field goals off a tee with no rush. Well, it looks like the Ravens, they got their next guy ready to go.
They're set.
You don't know that.
And not only that, it's like making a free throw in Game 7 with the game on the line. I mean, that's a heck of a lot different than kicking in the indoor.
Sitting there shooting free throws in the gym.
Right.
Fresh.
That's all it is.
I didn't run or anything ahead of it. I'm just standing there shooting free throws, and I make 95 out of 100.
I'm as good as Larry Bird at it, right?
It's not the same as doing it after running up and down the floor 12 times and then stepping up to the free throw line with the game on the line, and everybody's screaming. You got the fans waving the stuff behind you. It's different.
Let alone make a huge kick in Chicago in December, again, I mean, you're in that treadmill of the bad kickers, and there's a lot of teams that are forced to do that. Luckily, the Steelers aren't. But what do you gain when you cut your guy? We got some tape on Johnny that we're bringing in this week, but week 8, we're going to try him out. I'm like, great, but did you really learn any more from that tryout than you did then? It's different having him in camp at least.
Yeah.
You're at least around him more. But
or you get to see him in the preseason. Or
yeah.
That's why a guy like Matthew Wright has gotten so many opportunities because the Steelers gave him opportunities to kick in the preseason.
Which is kind.
Which is very kind because now there's tape on him actually kicking in a game with a pass rush. And you're like,
So somebody grabs him on speed dial. And to your point, Greg the Leg's perfect. Maybe he doesn't have the leg that Greg the Leg used to have, but I at least know mentally.
He's kicked in, game-winning field goals and things of that nature.
He can mentally handle it.
Yeah.
He's made a career of it, right? So I guess he could stick around a while, but you don't want to be on that carousel.
It's
a brutal one.
Terrible.
Very
terrible.
Bad.
I mean, I can remember back to say 18 when Boswell was having his down year, and people, you should just cut him. You should,
And then he has a good year for somebody else, and you're like, oh, man, I should have just waited that out. And I'm sure the Ravens went through that last year.
Yeah.
But then the off-field stuff came around. But, how long do we hang with this dude? Because I don't want to be on that carousel. And their new guy might be great. I have no clue.
I have no idea. Neither do they.
But they don't either. That's what I was going to say. They have no clue. Right. I mean, an undrafted dude or a fifth-round pick.
You're guessing or hoping, really.
You're hoping, right.
That's.
I assume they'll have 2 in camp.
They do. Yeah, they signed another rookie. So they got 2 rookies competing.
Okay. There should be a true competition.
And, when you look at, the Ravens are really, really loaded here. Are they? Because that could be a
rail
factor.
thing. That absolutely
could be a
rail
factor.
Thing. No question. I mean,
that could change the way that they try to play games.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely going to have to change them a little bit last year. You go past the 50, it's like, well, we got at least 3 here. We can play call accordingly, basically. Now, I mean, again, coaches don't sleep well at night when their kickers, one of those 5 to 10 that are on the revolving door.
Yeah,
and there's a better chance the Ravens have that now than they did.
Even if let's say he's league average.
Right.
That's not what they've had over the years with Tucker.
Right.
So
interesting.
Yeah. Let's get to another break. That's going to do it for hour number 1 of the drive here on the Steelers Audio Network. Matt and I will be back with a special hour number 2
fun.
Right after this. And welcome back to hour number 2 of the drive here on the Steelers Audio Network. I am Dale Lolley. He's Matt Williamson, and we got a special guest with us here today, author Jim Rooney. We can call you author Jim Rooney.
Yeah, I like that.
The book is A Different Way to Win, Dan Rooney's story from Super Bowl to the Rooney Rule. And, Jim, typically at this time of the show, it's kickoff hour number 2, we do fantasy football or mock drafts. We're not going to do that today. We're not
a little something different, right?
A little something different here. So obviously you've
timing's great with Ireland and all that, right?
You've been on the show before. We've talked about the book, first when you released it, then when you did the audio version of it. But for our listeners who haven't gotten the chance yet to purchase the book or hear the book, just give us a quick synopsis of A, why you decided to write the book, and B, what where this all took you.
Right. So, and Dale, Matt, thanks for having me. It's always good to be here. Yeah. So, we were going to write something for like a business journal about my father, about his work, particularly some of the work around the Rooney Rule in the NFL. And then he passed, and NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue said, we have all this good stuff. You should put it into a book. Now, my father had done his own book, as you know, with the History Center, but there were several things that happened since that book was published that we thought were really important. So then we had all this good content, as we now say. I then went on to do about 10, 15 more interviews with players, league executives, some coaches, all these folks that kind of had this important, engagement with my father throughout his business career. And, the thing that kept coming up was every one of them said, what's the one thing that Dan Rooney said? And they would all say, do the right thing.
Okay.
So, that was sort of his thing. And it was so consistent. It's like, okay, now we have sort of a theme of this book. And we tried to kind of answer the question, if you will, can you be a good guy and still win? And we tried to show that he's an example of doing that.
Okay, so a lot of questions for you, but did you really see that as a son in all through your life too? Did he often say do the right thing, as a father as well as in business, or both?
Yes. Yeah. Although he was not as kind to us as he was to the others.
He probably treated people a little different, right.
When he was saying do the right thing to us, it was a little sterner, it was a demand at times. Okay. But I do remember.
Wasn't a suggestion,
right?
Huh?
Exactly right. Okay. Exactly right. It was you will do the right thing.
Yeah.
But I remember coming in with somebody. I can't even remember what the idea was, but I said, we're going to make tons of money if we do with the Steelers. Putting a sticker on the other side of the helmet or something. I don't know what it was, but it was some idea that was, the greatest idea in the world, as we all think we have. And he said, we don't do that. He said, we're interested in doing the right thing. He said, if it leads to more money, great, but that's out of our lane. It's not what we focus on. And I think it's really a great example of when you focus on what you're strong at, you're able to be more successful. And I think that's one thing he did well.
Okay.
In terms of the interviews that you've done with it, you mentioned Paul Tagliabue. He's obviously in the book.
Right.
Some of the other people that you talked to, are no longer with us too, and that's kind of the neat part of this. You know, when you build a book like this and you talk to so many different people and you take your time doing it to do it the right way. For example, you sat down with Franco Harris before he passed, and it's just another glimpse into the lives of those people as well as and what they were, you know, going through or thinking and thought about your father.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you're talking about the Franco interview, because it was, you know, none of us expected Franco. You know, there's a couple of other folks that we interviewed, but that they have passed, and it's not a surprise, if you will, that they passed. But, you know, I remember I had talked to Franco about doing this. He goes, sure, I'd love to do it. And then COVID happened, so it took a little while to kind of put it together. And finally we get, you know, I got somehow a studio, a microphone situation set up at his house. Dana, his wife, helped me get that set up, and I was at my house. And, you know, we talked for an hour and a half. And I talked to Franco since that time 3 or 4 times, but I didn't think it would be one of the last. It was certainly the last deep conversation I had with Franco. So that was, it was just an amazing time. And, you know, we've all been around athletes, and we've seen great guys do great things. We've seen guys do some things that may not be the smartest things we've ever seen. Franco was the most unique. I've never seen someone with that much generosity that always seemed to be genuine. I don't know how he did it. You know, we'd be at events together, and I'd drive with him, you know, sometimes in the last 10 years of his life. And I'd be thinking, oh, why'd I drive with Franco? Because he would stay until, you know, midnight, shaking everyone's hands, signing any autographs, taking pictures.
He was Franco Harris 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Exactly.
There was no faking that.
No. And he didn't mind if it would make someone else feel good, he didn't mind being there.
Yeah. And your father was the same way. Your father never big-timed anybody.
Yeah.
Anybody.
Yeah.
And he was always available. He was always around. He was always visible with the team. And I think players appreciate that as well.
Yeah. I hope this doesn't sound obnoxious, but I remember it was one of the, you know, we have that festival after the draft. It's usually day 3 of the draft over at the stadium. And so they give people a tour of the locker room, and they come from the field up into the locker room on the backside. So, you know, that's about 200 feet. I mean, there was, you know, 100 people or so in this line. And I'm walking him out to the field. He always liked to go see what was going on. This was, you know, after he'd been back from Ambassador and everything. And someone started clapping, and the whole group started clapping. And that was just so touching to me. And he was embarrassed, but it just was a sign that folks that didn't even have never even met him, just really felt like this guy was the real deal. And that was a moment in my life. I was like, wow, this isn't just a guy that's had some success. This is a guy that really impacted people.
Wow. And then kind of with the father-son angle, I mean, you have 2 brothers that are been very involved with the team, obviously. And did you get contributions from them? Did you get feedback from them? Obviously, they had some involvement, right? You know, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, if it wasn't for my brother Art and Roger Goodell, the book would have never happened.
Okay.
You know, they both kind of, you know, plowed the snow, if you will, and said, look, we kind of blessed this project. So Roger at the NFL level said anything you need, and we did a lot of math on some of the historic data, things my father had done with Bill Nunn, and so everyone in the league really helped us look at, you know, players that were drafted in the 50s and 60s, and, you know, it's not the same data we have today. Access to other owners. We talked to John Mara from the Giants. We talked to Arthur Blank from the Falcons. You know, so Roger did that, and the same thing with Pittsburgh. Art said, yeah, look, I think this is a worthwhile project. You know, I really think you should do it. Now, with Art, my mother was alive, and she liked the project. So, you know.
She had a little pull in this, I'm sure.
Yeah. So when you're sitting down with somebody for an extensive interview like that, there had to be things that you learned about your father that you didn't know. Had to be.
Oh, had
somebody
to be.
told you a story that you hadn't heard. Is there anything that you can share like that?
Yeah. You know, it's funny because the thing that I always say when I get that question is, it just confirmed so much more than I learned something. But Tagliabue said something that was really cool, and you wouldn't think, you know, we think of Dan Rooney, you know, Dale, you and I have been around a little while, but he was still older most of our lives. And you don't think of him in this way. But Paul Tagliabue, the commissioner, said, Dan Rooney was the greatest risk taker I've ever seen in my life. And then Roger Goodell said, Dan Rooney dealt with change better than anyone I've ever met in business.
And were you sitting there going, we talking about the same
guy?
Right.
Exactly. Exactly. But I think it's an example of, whether it was labor, whether it was things with the realignment, which Roger really told me how much my father got involved in that and was different. The Rooney Rule, the stuff in Ireland. He was always willing to step into these messy situations. A lot of people in business would rather go around them. And they both said, no, he went in, it was messy, it was hard, you didn't know what the outcome was going to be, and things usually resulted in what they, better than the outcomes than you would expect it if you kind of didn't do it that way.
So you mentioned Bill Nunn a little bit ago, and I don't want to get away from that. And I bet a lot of our younger listeners in particular probably don't even know who he is, unfortunately, or know a little bit about him. But from my perspective, I mean, one of the huge reasons the Steelers were so good in the 70s was they were ahead of the curve with their scouting, and Bill Nunn was at the top of that. I mean, what all did you learn about that whole situation, and his impact on 4 Super Bowls?
Yeah. And so, it's funny because Art says this. Dan, my brother, as you talked about, as a scout, said this. My brother John, who doesn't do anything with the team. Bill was our boss at camp.
Okay.
So Bill Nunn was our first boss, Bill and Tony Parisi. And so you had this experience of him as sort of your boss and got to know him. And then as I got older, I'd always go up and see Dad, but I'd take a right and go into Bill's office. And, I'd go in to say hi for 5 minutes. I'd come out an hour and a half later
really?
Because he would just tell you all these stories. But from a scouting standpoint, and I know
his stories had to be unbelievable.
Oh, they were the greatest stories.
I mean, even like his father,
right,
all the way back.
Yep.
Everyone should research it. It's unbelievable.
It is. But what he talked about, I think you've probably heard this, Matt, but he would always try to go to a dance on campus because he wanted to see how the guys moved. So when he would go to these schools, he'd go because he wanted to say, he said, all right, that guy looks too heavy, but he says if he could move on the dance
on his
floor,
feet.
he was light on his feet. Same with the little guys. He said if they couldn't dance, I was always concerned, were they as good of athlete as I was seeing on film? So I thought that was a great sort of trick.
I thought you were
going
to
to
say how they interacted with others, or they sit in a corner by themselves,
right,
or were they the life of the party?
I'm sure that was part of it, but the dancing part of it, I mean,
it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, for people who don't know, like Bill Nunn's father, if Muhammad Ali was in town, he was there. If Martin Luther King was in town, he was there. I mean, it's crazy. Really, really impressive.
Yeah. I mean, Bill Nunn's father was one of the first people to fund the Thurgood Marshall in his effort to change Brown versus Board of Education.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Nunn's father played a major role in what is a massive policy in our country.
Wow. Really impressive.
Big impact on society.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and then his son was Art's buddy at training camp and was
Bill
the great
Nunn's
actor.
son.
Bill Nunn the
Bill
third.
Nunn the third.
Yeah.
An actor.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
So
Do the Right Thing and Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, yeah.
Oh, really?
Wow. Regarding
Family.
Henry.
Yeah, he was in several movies before he passed, unfortunately.
Okay.
But
But he hung with Art at camp.
Yeah,
when they were younger.
the same
best
age.
friends.
Okay.
So there's a great photo in that I think it's an office now. It used to be a conference room across from the scouts room. And in the photo you have my grandfather wearing this fedora, shaking Joe Green's hand, and Bill Nunn is one of the ball boys walking in with a towel over his shoulder.
Oh, wow.
Well, the book is A Different Way to Win, Dan Rooney's story from the Super Bowl to the Rooney Rule. The author is, of course, Jim Rooney, his son. And Jim, if people haven't gotten the book and read the book, they need to do so. Or get the audio version and throw it in on while you're – the audio version, to me, you've included the entirety of the interviews, correct? Or the majority of them?
Well, so with the audio version, we took the Ireland section out, which we're going to talk about today. I think,
absolutely.
Because we just felt like we tried to. It was this idea that Penguin Random House Audio did. It wasn't me; it was the publisher. But it's a cross between an audio read and a podcast. So you have me read a chapter, and then you have an interview with Roger Goodell or my brother Art or Franco, Rocky, after each chapter. And we tried to put more extended versions of the interview next to the chapter that they might be talking.
So it's almost like a 60 Minutes kind of thing where you're sitting down with these people and just you're getting even more in depth. It's something that you always struggle with. I know I do when I'm writing a story. I hate spending, 20 minutes talking to somebody, and then you use maybe 5 minutes of the interview in the story, and you're like, boy, I hate to cut that out, but I can't have this thing be this long. Now, writing a book is a little different. You don't have the same constraints, but it's like, I wish I could use that. Maybe I'll save it for something later.
Yep.
In this instance, you're able to use it all.
We used a lot. There's still some good stuff on the cutting room floor, so some ideas of some things we might do with that, but we used a lot of it. But we put Franco, so I had Franco's interview right before I talked about the Steelers' 70s, and we took it out because the publisher said that's just too long and put it at the end of the book, because I was like, well, we can't shortchange Franco. So at the very end of the book, you have all of Franco's interview for exactly that reason.
Yeah.
So if I understand it right, if someone has read the book but has not done the audio, they will get different stuff.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah,
and you get some really cool stuff. I mean, Roger Goodell goes into some really interesting ideas of sort of how the sausage was made to how we got the business model of the NFL today.
Oh, wow.
And my father's role in that. Tagliabue talks about the labor negotiations and, that my father was sort of the best negotiator, but it was because all the lawyers would make things much more complicated than he'd simplify them for everyone.
Well, let's get to a break. Our guest is Jim Rooney, author of A Different Way to Win, Dan Rooney's story. And we'll be back with more with Jimmy after this. We're going to talk a little Ireland in the next segment. And I know that's very near and dear to your family's, largely because of your father and your grandfather, but it's a big part of the Rooney story as well. So we'll do that when we return. He is Matt Williamson. I am Dale Lolley. You're listening to The Drive here on the Steelers Audio Network. And we are back. I am Dale Lolley. He is the Matt Williamson, and we're joined in the studio here by Jim Rooney. And Jim, of course, the author of the book, A Different Way to Win, Dan Rooney's story from the Super Bowl to the Rooney Rule, but also a Rooney brother here. And your father on September 28th there it's going to be 2:30 in the afternoon. I expect a little ray of sunlight to come shining down on the middle of the field.
Maybe a rainbow, an Irish rainbow.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Pot of gold, that's perfect.
Right. We were both at the game back in the 90s when the Steelers played the Chicago Bears at Croke Park. This is going to have a different meaning to it, being the first regular season game on the island of Ireland. And your dad, I can only imagine how over the moon he would be about this.
Well, and he was not at that game in '96. Do you remember? Was it was either Franco or Coach Knoll went in the Hall of Fame that day?
Yeah.
So he flew over and spent the week, and then he left on Friday night. And we had the game. I think the game was Sunday. I don't remember Saturday. I
can't remember either at this point, but it was a long time ago. I just remember him setting up first of all, we did the dinner out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
I don't even know where it was at on the island. I just remember the buses driving on these roads that were about from me to you wide.
right.
And I'm like, this isn't good. But I also remember we made the trip up the coast to Northern Ireland, up to Belfast, and it was just the work that he had done up there as well. I mean, he really, even before he was the ambassador there, had done a lot of work with the Ireland Fund and everything else, to kind of try to create some peace in the country.
Yeah, he worked really hard at that, and his closest partner was a gentleman who just passed away this last year, Tony O'Reilly, who was the CEO of Heinz for many years. And Tony was born in Dublin, was a great rugby player, and then got into the food business at Kerry Butter, which is an Irish butter company, and then Heinz hired him out of that. But so the funny story of the Ireland Fund, so the Ireland Fund does some really important work, and I now have my father's seat on the board, which I think is really cool. But so how it started, though, is O'Reilly wanted to raise some money for the Royal College of Surgeons, a big medical program in Ireland. And it was the first year we won the Super Bowl, so they gave the award to my grandfather. And it was up in New York City at the Waldorf, and they had a really nice night. They had a lot of people show, but they spent more money putting the dinner together than they made. So they always said they had the second dinner to pay for the first dinner.
Okay.
So that was O'Reilly's story. But it was such a successful night that they said we could do this for broader purposes. And so they really started thinking about, all the issues throughout all of Ireland, because in the north you had the Troubles. So you had issues, where you had Catholics and Protestants, but the issues were playing out relative to housing, relative to job opportunities, relative to education.
Like it just struck me when we went there. Like, you don't understand. There were walls between neighborhoods, and things of that nature. It's way more than you could imagine happening here in the United States, and it's just like, wow, this is different.
I remember when I was a kid, we went over a fair amount, and my father would take us. We always say we were taking us on vacation to Northern Ireland, but there was barbed wire on all of those walls.
Yeah.
So it was. I mean, you felt that sense. There were armored vehicles going up and down. You just felt that kind of sense of fear and angst. And so many good people did so much work. But the president of Ireland says this really cool thing. So there's this thing called the peace dividend that you hear often when there's a peace process in different countries. But she said Dan and Tony created the prosperity dividend, and that if they didn't do this work for all those years, getting people educated, helping people find access to jobs, getting investment into Northern Ireland, the peace would have never held, because the violence is the result of desperation. And so I really thought that was a really cool statement about his contribution and how important it was. At the same time, in the Republic of Ireland, the economy was horrible in the 70s. And so they really looked at the United Way here in the United States and sort of tried to build something that would, take money to different charities, and they would have, some Irish folks who had expertise in that, figure out where the money went, while Dad and Tony kind of raised it from different charity events here in the United States.
So I have a bunch of questions about your dad's ambassadorship. I think that's a word, right?
Yes.
I mean, how did
if
that
it's not,
come?
we'll
roll with it. Right.
Right.
I shouldn't even ask. Just let it fly. How did that come about? Did he actively pursue that? Did somebody ask him? How long was he the ambassador to Ireland? Was he involved with the Steelers while he was over there? And if so,
he
to
absolutely
what degree?
Was not. And I'll let all the taxpayers know that he was fully focused on.
He still watched.
Right.
He still paid attention.
You know who won on Sunday.
Yeah.
But
No, he. So let me go backwards. Let me start with
the
what he did with the Steelers. So he would, he didn't. Since I was lowest on the totem pole, he'd call me at 5 a.m. Kevin said he got a call at 6 a.m. Kevin Colbert.
Okay.
Mike said he'd get a call about 7, and Art would get a call about 7:30. So he would talk to us before his day got started over in Ireland, or at least before our day got started. Then he'd work these full days.
That was every day?
Every day.
Really?
He'd always be calling us.
Yeah.
And then he would work these full days, and then every night they would have, half that job is about building relationships. And so they would have events, and these events were really important because, as we talked about, you still had the remnants of what we called the Troubles. So he would have different groups over from these different segments, and he was always trying to do things to bring folks together, to build bridges and connections. So that was sort of a hallmark of his ambassadorship. There's a couple other, I think, important points that are good stories we can talk about as we go here, but that's sort of a high level description of it.
So Croke Park itself is the event center on the island. I mean, every big event that has taken, some good, some bad,
right.
has taken place in that stadium for over 100 years now. It's almost 150 that we're closing in on here. I don't know if Steeler fans I wrote a story about the park when the game was announced, and learned even more about it than I'd already known. But this is a big deal for the game to be played on that stadium turf.
Right. As you had said the other day, Dale, the British troops rolled in, I think it was 1918, and killed several players of a rugby match, as well as fans in the stadium, because they were getting out of hand. We can talk about whether that's the Sunday, Bloody Sunday that U2's talking about, or
there's two different
the event that happened in '71. But it just marked such a painful moment in Irish history. but like so many places where sports, seems to kind of bring people together, over the years, it's become a symbol of, okay, this is a place where we have such great pride in Ireland. And, I had a really meaningful moment. So I first was there in, I think, 76. I went to a hurling match, which is a game similar to lacrosse. But then in 87, we all went over. There's 9, me are part of nine kids, 4 boys, 5 girls. And a couple people had babies, so I don't know if everyone made the show. But we went over that summer, as my dad would take us often, but we went to see U2. And so, never forget that concert. It was their first, I think it was the first time they played in Croke Park. And just an amazing show. And at the end, they had fireworks. After the fireworks, there was a thunderstorm behind the stadium. So it was like they continued. And, this is U2's homecoming. And, just to be part of the
at
passion.
the time when they were maybe the biggest band in the world.
Huge. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was tremendous. So, and then, so the other reason that moment is important is, as you know, Dale, I had 3 sisters passed away from different health ailments, Kathleen, Rita, and Joan. And that was the last time we were all together, was that
really?
trip in Ireland. So that visit to Croke Park means a lot to me.
Yeah.
So since your father's passing, do many of your siblings get over there often, or do you go from time to time, or?
It's funny. I used to go a lot. Now I'm on this board, but I haven't been there in a while. Dan has really been there a lot with the game. When we made this, the Mexico deal, I think, was something that was really important. Everyone wanted. Now we have Germany, but there's a heart in Ireland that really means something.
Mm-hmm.
And my nephew Dan has just done a fantastic job building out the relationship there.
And that's Art's son, for people that don't know.
Yep,
Okay, yeah.
Yep. And our footprint there is much bigger than it should be. And I think Dan deserves credit for that work. I also have to say the other Dan who we're talking about, Dan.
Some
Rooney.
Dans and Arts get a little confusing, I'm sure.
There's a lot of Jims too.
Yeah, true.
So as I remind all the Dans and Arts, the only time a uniform had the name Rooney on it said Jim Rooney or J.P. Rooney. So that was my Uncle Jim.
Okay.
I remind them of that.
So the game itself, obviously playing the Minnesota Vikings there, it's the same team that happened to play in London in 2013, the only other time the Steelers have gone internationally. It's kind of a neat little aside to this whole thing that the Vikings technically founded Dublin.
Right.
Not the Minnesota ones either. We're talking about here. But again, the Steelers playing, it kind of brings it all together. The Steelers were the first NFL game to take place at Croke Park with the Bears, and now you're hosting the Vikings there. It's just really I got to imagine your father, again, somewhere up there is just looking at this and just smiling ear to ear over this whole thing.
Well, and there's a great museum, since he was always promoting Ireland and the cultural aspects. There's a great Viking museum in Dublin where they tell, well, it's a historical museum, but there's a lot of it that talks about when the Vikings came over. So, we're here to sell to Steeler fans, but if you're a Vikings fan, there's some value.
I'm a history buff.
There.
I might go there. I want to check out the museum at Croke Park because there's a great museum there as well. But I enjoy going to seeing historical things like that. It might be something I check out. I've read a bunch of books on the era.
Right.
Right. It's interesting to learn kind of where you came from, in terms of that kind of stuff. Like just the way Europe has changed over the years.
Yeah.
I mean, just this group was there, that group was there. Then this group came in, that group moved out. Then they merged. And there's so much of that in Europe that we're all mutts, really.
Right. Absolutely.
We're all just one big conglomeration of all kinds of different.
Did you go to the Titanic Museum in 96?
I did not.
I mean, that'd be a little bit of a train ride. I don't know how much extra time, but that's another great museum in Ireland. And then if you're a Game of Thrones fan, they have that whole Game of Thrones drive up in Belfast.
Now you're talking my language. That sounds fun.
Yeah, that's do that. You guys can.
So it's more
sneak over there a little
more
bit.
than just the game, more than just the football. The football is the reason why you go.
Right.
But then you also get to take in the rest of Ireland, which is beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. If you're a golfer, it's one of the best places in the world to golf. We once
the pubs are kind of fun.
Pubs aren't a bad thing to do, And on one of those gray, rainy days, the weather's actually pretty nice in September. But if you happen to get a rainy day there, get to the pub early. It's a good place to spend some time.
Nice. How many Rooneys are we expecting to make the trip for the game?
Oh, I mean,
a lot. No?
My cousins, I have had more requests for this. I'm serious. Not that I'm not otherwise, but more requests than this than for the Super Bowl.
Really?
More people have wanted to go to this game. Maybe it's just because of the kind of worlds I'm in. But,
yeah.
But everyone wants to go to this game.
Wow.
It's a huge event, and we had Michael McQuaid on from NFL,
right. Yep.
Dublin or Ireland earlier this week, and like they sell out the main events for the All Ireland finals are ridiculous. You can't get tickets for it. He's like everybody's asking their parish priest if they can, if they have an extra ticket. I would expect this to be just as hot a ticket over there.
Yeah,
I mean it's going to be difficult to get.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, the NFL just started the lottery the other day, and I've told everyone that's asked me, I said, put your name in that lottery. I said, that's probably the best chance, because it's tough.
But even if you can't get tickets to the game, go on over. There's going to be all kinds of events and everything. It's going to be a great week, and it's a great place to visit too. I mean, there aren't many places in the world, and I've been to a lot of different places over the years, where you can go. Everybody was happy that we were there, and they also speak the language, even though it's, you pick up on the brogue pretty quickly, but it's not that hard to understand. But it was just the entire week we spent there was fantastic. And again, I've been all over the different places around the world, and probably by far they were the most friendly of any place that I've been. I mean,
I bet there's a fair amount of black and gold over there too.
I would think so.
Yeah.
I would think so.
We the first time we all went over, I think, was 75, 76. And, but so there was 9 of us. And so we traveled in groups of 9, 12, 15 for about 20 years, going back and forth. Once, the older Art, my sister Pat, my sister Kathleen, once they started having kids. And, we were this little pack, and we would always be in one of those buses and on those roads that you can see, but we had so much fun, just visiting different places, visiting relatives. My mother had relatives there. Golfing, me, Art, Dan, John, my dad got in a fist fight on a golf course in Ireland. So we just had so many wonderful times there. It was great, and like you're saying, a lot of evenings dancing in the pub and singing songs. And
was your grandfather real involved with the country?
My grandfather wasn't as involved. I don't know that it was as common,
because
it wasn't easy to
travel.
Right. So my grandfather may have been there before my father, but certainly not as often as my father.
It wasn't a regular thing.
Right.
Well, our guest is Jim Rooney, of course, author of A Different Way to Win, Dan Rooney's story from the Super Bowl to the Rooney Rule. We're going to take another break. We'll be back to finish up the show. Jim's going to stay here with us. We'll do that right after this. He's Matt Williamson. I'm Dale Lolley. You're listening to The Drive here on the Steelers Audio Network. And we are back. I am Dale Lolley. He is Matt Williamson. And we're joined here in studio by Jim Rooney, author of A Different Way to Win, Dan Rooney's story from the Super Bowl to the Rooney Rule. We've talked a lot of Ireland here. We've talked a ton about your dad. There's all kinds of stuff to talk about in both of those subjects. But the game itself this year in Ireland, Jim, there's some special things going on with that as well in terms of what they're going to do with the field and the logo on the field and those kind of things.
Well, so the that is going to be some special things that I'm not allowed to reveal today, but it reminds me of the field that he built at the embassy when he was actually at the residence for the 4th of July game. So on the 4th of July, every embassy has a baseball game. Dale, I know you wish we still did baseball, but he said, no, we're doing football. And so he put together this massive event that we had. I was an announcer one year. Art coached one team. My brother Dan coached the other. I think those two almost got in a fist fight. My son Jimmy played on one team. Right, exactly. Young Dan played on another team. So it was such a great thing. But a bunch of the Marines that were stationed would be on each team. And where the Steelers symbol is at the middle of our stadium, or Cowboys at their stadium, on the 50-yard line. And I got to be there when they first came out. So we did this, and then we brought all of the Marines out to see it. My father put the seal of the United States of America in the middle of that field. And I remember the Marines, many of those have served beyond just Ireland,
right.
and walking out and getting the photo of them the first time, and how much that meant to them, that my father really went to that level of detail. That was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen. And then I think those guys all fought each other too when they played against each other in the flag football game. But
anytime you keep a score, I mean,
right.
Come on.
That's exactly it.
But as soon as you put it on the scoreboard, it just becomes different.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Doesn't matter what the game is.
You were telling us a little bit between the breaks of how involved your dad was with the military over there. And, I mean, it sounds like there's quite a bit to it.
Yeah. This and my mother, too, this really was something that they just cared deeply about. And my mother, who is not the greatest cook in the world, but she would bake. I mean, I think she had a lot of help because they ended up baking hundreds of them. But they would go visit. So in Shannon Airport, which is on the west side of Ireland, that was a refueling station for the troops on their way to Afghanistan and Iraq. And they would, as many as they could, just about every weekend, they would take a trip out to Shannon when troops were going back and forth. And they would have a little celebration, a little welcoming for them. And my father talked about two really different experiences. So when the folks were on their way out, it wasn't somber, but it was much more serious. And people talked about sort of this role as sort of a elderly sort of figure that he was for these guys. And he'd go shake everyone's hand, and so that was really special. When they came back, it was much more about fun. They were all having fun.
Yeah.
So he'd always be, if a guy had a Ravens jersey on, he'd be all over them,
nice.
Patriots or Browns. So they said it was they loved seeing him in both elements, but they were laughing at how willing he was to give someone a hard time, if they were, cheering for another team than the Steelers.
Okay.
But those were moments that, you don't hear about that in sort of The Ambassador, but that was just such a critical role, and really, as I said, my mother kind of led it, and
he didn't have to do that.
No, that was all extra, and she was like, "Look, this is as important as anything else we're going to do."
Okay,
as ambassador.
How much does your mom come up in the book?
So, well, she didn't want to be up at all, but I talked about her and her father, and her father who came from Ireland, and the influence he had on my dad, and the Irish singing and sort of the cultural aspects, because the Chief's father, it was 4 generations that the Rooneys were already in the United States. Certainly they lived in a lot of Irish Catholic sort of enclaves in Pittsburgh, but he was 4 generations removed. My mother's father had come from County Mayo, so it was much closer. My grandfather.
Okay.
Yep. So. But she was great. I interviewed her about 3 different times, and she
like
told
a real sit down.
Yeah. We did it, and I'm not going to get into all these, but I'd say, I talked to this person. That she goes, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
She knows all.
Right. Exactly.
Exactly. Right.
Well, the book is A Different Way to Win, Dan Rooney's story from the Super Bowl to the Rooney Rule, and it's not just a book; it's also an audio book as well. Where can you get these things, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or Jim, I'm sorry.
No. That's a compliment. So you can get the audiobook anywhere you download audiobooks. So Apple Books, Amazon has Audible, Google Play. But I also, I've been kind of pitching the audiobook for the last year and really enjoying that. But this is a good time to also buy the book, which you can get at the Steelers official pro shops, because in the textbook we have the 3 chapters on Ireland, and if you're interested in Ireland, if you want to know why this game might be fun and important, and Dale keeps talking about the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that my dad's going to provide for us, hopefully with a win. You'll really understand that the work my father did in the Steelers kind of taught him and allowed him to play a big role in Ireland, and the experiences he had in Ireland came back and were important to things he did in terms of the way he treated folks in the labor negotiations and so many things. So there's a real kind of back and forth that we try to convey that he grew and learned throughout his life experiences, and was always about trying to make the situation better and treat people well.
That's great stuff, and I urge everybody to go get the book. Go get both versions. There's more in both.
I like that.
Nice long plane ride from Pittsburgh to Ireland to knock out both.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Do one on the way over, one on the way back.
Exactly.
There you go, and you'll have the whole story. But that's going to do it for our show today. We want to thank Jim for stopping by and giving us more information on this and taking us down some trips down memory lane and just some of his memories of Ireland and things of that nature. But for my partner, Matt Williamson, for C.J. Wolfley here running the soundboard, making sure we stay on the air, and for Tyler Vittmeyer, making sure the video gets out there onto YouTube. Give us a thumbs up there. Leave us your comments and all that stuff. I do go on there and read them and answer questions and all that kind of stuff. I'm Dale Lolley. We thank you for listening to this edition of The Drive on the Steelers Audio Network.
Steelers football happens here. The Pittsburgh Steelers Audio Network.